Welcome back. Federal district judge said this afternoon the federal government, meaning the Trump Justice Department, quote, evaded its obligations, unquote, to answer that judge's questions about deportation flights involving undocumented Venezuelans in our country sent to El Salvador. I want to bring in our legal panel, Tom Dupree and Jessica Levinson. Tom served as the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Justice Department, and Jessica is a well-known and much-treasured CBS News contributor and professor at the Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. So, Tom, I want to start with you because, as Scott MacFarlane outlined at this desk a few moments ago, this is about an immigration situation, but it is also about a larger conflict between the administration and the federal judiciary with words like defiance, failure to live up to obligations, and possibly ignoring something that the administration disagrees with, and while it ignores it, trying to create a political atmosphere where impeachment and other kinds of things are suggested.
That's right. There's a lot going on here, and I don't think we've quite crossed the line into constitutional crisis yet, but we are in what I would say is a constitutional showdown. And it really gets to one of the fundamental questions under our structure of government. Basically, how much authority does the president have to unilaterally conduct these removal operations? In the view of the administration, the statute that he's acting under, the Alien Enemies Act, which is an old statute, hasn't really been invoked since World War II, but it's still on the books.
Still on the books.
And in the president's view, he is lawfully exercising his authority and is not subject to pretty much any sort of judicial scrutiny or review. Judge Boasberg appears to see it a little differently. I think he's still wrestling a little bit with precisely what his role is, but at a minimum, he's asked the Justice Department a series of questions that, in his words, the department has evaded, at least for now.
And Jessica, those who represent the interests of these deported Venezuelans say, look, at least prove in court that they're members of this gang. And the administration seems less interested in that, like providing actual evidence.
Well, that's right. And that's partly based on the language of the statute that you were just talking about, this very old 18th century statute, the Aliens Enemies Act, where I think there's some question as to how much you have to prove. Now, they're looking at a portion of that statute that is triggered not in wartime, but in the situation where you have an invasion or a, quote, predatory incursion. And I think there's some question, frankly, about how much proof you really need in order to trigger the statute. But you were talking about something separate also, which I think is really important, is not whether the Trump administration can use the statute, because the judge said, pause, wait 1 second, we'll sort this out. And the argument we're dealing with now is whether or not the Trump administration really did pause. And specifically, the argument is the Trump administration won't come forward with evidence indicating whether or not they followed the judge's order. I love Tom's comment that this is a showdown, but not yet a crisis.
And this really goes to designated powers of the president, which are in many cases vast. The Economist, as it so frequently does, I think, has encapsulated this. And the control room is going to be very angry with me because we don't have a graphic. So just listen to me. I'm going to read from what The Economist wrote today. What Mr. Trump appears to be claiming is the right to designate people as gang members on what evidence is unclear and send them to be locked up in a country where torture is common and gang suspects can be held indefinitely without trial. You don't have to be a tattooed Venezuelan, so writes The Economist, to be worried by the suspension of habeas corpus. Break that down, Tom.
Sure. Well, look, far be it above me to quibble with The Economist, which generally is right in most things. And look, I think the point they're making here is a fair one, is that the consequences for these individuals is unquestionably severe. They've been removed from the United States and placed in very oppressive conditions, to say the least. But I think the question is whether the administration is properly asserting its authority. And to Jessica's point, the president can exercise this authority, provided that we're in a state of war or if there's some sort of invasion. And so I think the legal question here may boil down to whether or not you basically have to take the president at his word when he says that in the view of the administration, we're either in a war situation or an invasion situation, and he can properly invoke that authority. And whether that determination is something that a judge can look at or second guess.
And Jessica, anyone who is in this country illegally can be deported. That's a fact. Anyone who is a criminal in this country can be deported, and even more rapidly. There are other procedures by which to carry this out.
There are, but this particular statute reduces a lot of those procedures or that process. And this
Which
is
may be
something
why
that
the administration is using it.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I think that's why we have seen for a while now that one, the president laid the groundwork by saying that this Venezuelan gang was a group of foreign terrorists, that it should be designated as foreign terrorists. Two, you see in the executive orders, the administration, since inauguration day, has been using words like invasion and predatory incursion, again, laying the groundwork for using the statute, which in my mind makes it much easier to deport people if you can point to them and say it's a predatory incursion, they pose a national security risk. I'm paraphrasing the statute on that part, and therefore we don't have to go through all that timely and resource heavy process. We can say here's the plane.
Tom, it feels, as so many of these situations do right now, as if the administration, the Justice Department under President Trump, is spoiling for a fight before the Supreme Court.
They are. Look, I think that they realize that this question ultimately is going to migrate upwards, certainly to the Court of Appeals and very possibly to the Supreme Court. And look, I agree with Jessica's point that the reason the administration is invoking this statute is precisely because the ordinary process of removing illegal aliens is long and cumbersome. I know that. I've litigated these cases in the Justice Department. It can take years to fully litigate one of these cases for a single individual. And the statute that the president is acting under now is the precise other end of the spectrum. It enables him to round up people en masse and get them out of the country within a matter of hours, maybe days. Much faster, much more streamlined, much different. That's why they're invoking this authority. And this is an early test case. If this gets through and passes judicial muster, I suspect they won't hesitate to use it again.
Which is why civil libertarians are nervous, not necessarily about people who are part of this Venezuelan prison gang, but others who might fall under declared powers of the executive branch.
Well, look, anytime the president is exercising powerful, muscular authority, as Trump is doing here, there's the question of what role, if any, do judges have to play in supervising that authority? And we're going to find out the answer one way or the other pretty soon.
Tom Dupree is also much treasured. You've heard why. So is Jessica Levinson. Thank you both very much.